If you followed me here for my other show, I just want to say thanks. If you reached out and expressed support, I can't tell you how much that's meant to me over the last few weeks. If you're one of the people who shared an accomplishment with me, something you felt like I had something to do with, from losing weight and getting healthy to surviving loss to starting a business or developing an incredible program for kids or even just making it through a boring commute or work shift, you guys deserve the credit for that. You deserve the pat on the back. All those good things came from inside you. If anything I ever said made a difference, that feels really good. And I hope that you'll find this show helpful as well. If you just stumbled on this show on iTunes or one of the other platforms and have no idea what I'm talking about, all I can say is, welcome to the Less Than Obvious podcast. I'm your host, Jim McDonald. On this show, I talk to people about less than obvious choices and the outcomes of those choices. But just some programming notes. As I've gotten into the process of producing this show, I'm realizing that the smartest way for me to deal with it and try to run my business at the same time is to produce it in seasons of about 10 episodes apiece. So I'll do 10 episodes and then take a break and then come back with 10 more. I don't know how else to do it because I'm going to spread myself too thin and I'm going to kill the quality. And I don't really want to do that. So try to keep the quality high and make an enjoyable show for all of you. Some of these first shows are going to feature people from the health and fitness world just because that's where I've been the last 12 years or so. But my interests go way outside that, and I'm sure yours do too. So I'm going to try to introduce more variety going forward. I'm realizing too that there's going to be a bias towards job and educational and career decisions. And I think that's just because so much of our lives turn on those decisions. They seem to have the most impact. But obviously, I have interests way beyond that as well, too. So I will actually be mixing that up as we go forward as well. This first episode is actually the product of a couple of different interviews done about a year apart. A year or so ago, I was working on piloting another show, and I didn't end up going forward with it for a number of reasons, but I realized that as I was thinking about this show, the nugget, the nucleus of this show was also in that interview. It's one of the things that always interests me in having a great conversation with someone about the course of their lives. So I brought the subject of that interview back and we did some supplemental stuff and came up with a full-on episode. My guest is Ryan Spencer, someone I've known and been in the gym with since about 2007, I think. Spence, as he's known to most people, is an accomplished powerlifter, having squatted 507 pounds, benched 314 pounds, and deadlifted 645 pounds in just a belt and knee sleeves, no other gear. He really wanted me to point that out. He's about 5'5", usually weighs between 165 and 175 pounds. He's also competed as a bodybuilder, and that figures into the episode a little later on. We talked about the fact that his dream job was to be a high school teacher and basically get to relive his high school glory days pretty much until he retired, and the decision that he made that had the less than obvious outcome of taking him off that path forever. Let's jump into the conversation.
My name is Ryan Spencer. I am a lobbyist at a firm in Sacramento, Damari Brown Hicks & Kessler.
So let's go back. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
A high school teacher.
High school teacher.
And I was all set on that course. I really enjoyed my high school days. I still look back at them very fondly. I keep in contact with all my high school friends to this day. And during that time, there were some teachers who I really respected. And I always thought to myself, man, it'd be really nice to be that teacher, to have other students look up to me and, with the admiration I had for them. And so in that process, of course, I was an athlete, with parentheses. I should say I'm an athlete because if my friends listen to this, they'll make fun of me. So I played sports.
You played sports. There you go.
I always tell people I'm strong. I'm not an athlete. There was a guy, actually, a bunch of football coaches, but I'll leave his name out. But he was a history teacher, which I loved history, and he was also our football coach. And I kind of saw a trend where a lot of history teachers were also football coaches. Yep. And history happened to be my favorite topic, storytelling. How can you not like storytelling?
Right.
So one of the things that I thought about doing, maybe I'll be a high school football coach. And I really enjoyed my high school life. I was, shocking enough, I was homecoming queen. I was homecoming queen. I was homecoming king.
Yeah.
And I was also on this, the associate students body, and so I was very involved. So I really enjoyed my high school. So I had very good feelings about it, and I thought, you know what, this would be cool. I admired my teachers if I became a school teacher. My family background is education. It seemed like a natural progression for me.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. It's like you look at the professions around you, and the ones that you know the most about are the ones that are in your family.
Exactly.
And so it's like, well, I can see myself fitting in with that because I see how my family member fits into that.
That's right.
So I didn't have the kind of high school experience that I would want to repeat forever, but apparently Spence did, and God bless people like him who actually like high school.
I thought, what a cool life that would be, to be able to go to high school, teach a subject you love, and afterwards, get together with some, football players or whatever sport, and coach them afterwards as well. And I thought it'd be just a good kind of stable life, live in suburbia and just, have a good time. And so that's what I thought about it.
Have your summers off.
Have my summers off, which I know is a little bit misleading because teachers don't get you get the whole summer off, but they're still, working.
Did you know when you went to college, were you taking an education major straight from the get-go in college?
Oh yeah, I was focused on history. That was my history major, kinesiology, a minor, which is PE. And the reason I kind of deviated away from PE toward the end, I picked up a political science minor, which actually put me on that path I'm in now, is because I enjoy science. I enjoy playing sports and watching sports, but kinesiology, I come to find out, is pretty hard. I mean, it's almost like pre-med. So coupling that with my history degree, kind of yin and yang, I kind of decided to focus more on social sciences. And so but initially I was history, kinesiology, but I was still focused on being a teacher. And then halfway through, I decided to switch over to political science minor, just to get that minor, and it complemented my history degree quite a bit. But I still was saying I'm going to be a teacher.
So did you feel as though the kinesiology minor was lending itself toward being able to coach, or do people normally have that degrry, or was it just like an icing on the cake situation?
Icing on the cake. I mean, it could have been just some naivety on my behalf because I thought if I'm going to be a coach, I should probably also know a little bit about physical education and stuff like that too, which not all football coaches are PE majors, so, or even have a minor, but it was, or even, I didn't even have to have a minor, but I just chose to do it. And I thought it could possibly help me, in that time, help me become a better coach. And honestly, there were some classes, like there was, like sports therapy, like what athletic trainers take. There were courses you take that you would need to know when you're a coach. And I remember one course that actually was focused on that. It was like one unit. It wasn't a big deal. And then, that would be probably the one class I thought would actually transfer over. But I didn't really take kinesiology that long to go into the tough courses. I was taking them, got all my, the easy, the one unit electives you take, playing sports. And then when I realized what I would have to take is when I decided, I don't want to do that.
Take a look at the syllabus and think, I don't really want to.
What else is out there?
So were you imagining what it was going to be like to, graduate, get your teaching credential?
Oh yeah. I was a cool teacher, man. I was going to be they always like my high school friends. I always tell folks like this today. We were like the Saved by the Bell crew. We were involved in everything. We were in the musicals. We all played sports, and we, when the assemblies popped out, the ones that didn't play football were always in that. They did the halftime stuff. The ones that did play football during basketball, that's when they kind of stepped up and did all the rallies and the assembly. And there was always a teacher that was kind of involved helping plan all that, and I was going to be that teacher. The teacher's going to help help people get involved in the school, get them excited about going to school, and then of course there'd be that one student that was left out, and I'd be the one that would bring that left out student into the fray. Make sure that everybody was having a good time in high school. For those listening, I grew up in a small town, Redding, California. High school, much different experience than a lot of people probably had in high school. I enjoyed high school. I didn't experience I didn't experience any level of bullying. I'm sure it was there. Hopefully I wasn't one.
Probably not.
I don't think I was, but when you're high school, you don't think what you're doing is causing harm to anybody, but maybe so, young age.
Right.
But that said, I know I'm going on and on about how much I loved high school, and everybody had the same experience. But it was a small town, and as envisioned, it was as you could probably envision when you think about a suburban small town up in Northern California. That was what we did. We went to high school, and everything that you socialized was based on high school and your friends there. So
So you kind of get to live the glory days of high school just like every day for the rest of your
That's
career.
right. Exactly. That's the way I looked at it. I had such a good time in high school. Then once I'll go to college for a little bit. I'll I sound like a total dork saying this, but yeah, that's exactly right. I'll go to college for a little bit, and then I'll go back to high school, but as a teacher this time, and still continue that fun that I had back then, and teach a cool subject.
You had shared your thought about becoming a teacher with your family, obviously.
Yes.
And they were supportive of that?
Ish.
What was their vision?
No, my dad was not hot on me being a teacher.
Oh, really?
He actually thought I should probably do something else.
My dad was a mechanic, and he just swore I would never be a mechanic. Like, I understood what he was doing. Like, I understood how it all worked, and
Sure.
I worked with him, some over the years when I was a kid. And like, he said, no, you're going to be like an attorney or something like that.
Sure.
And I was like, all right, whatever, As an adult, I found out that when I was a kid, my dad thought I was never going to learn to do all the normal stuff like, drive a car or change a tire or change a toilet seat or paint a wall, things that adults pretty much take for granted, or they at least used to take for granted. And I figured all that stuff out on my own. And you know what? I doubted my own kids in the same way, and they figured all that stuff out on their own too. I also found out that my dad thought that when I took a year off college that I would never, ever go back. I guess it's better to not know sometimes what your parents are thinking, because they're not always right.
Well, my dad wasn't, he was a high school counselor. He did it all. He was a teacher to start out with, became a counselor, administrator. But he's seen the lows of the educational system and the ups, and the butting heads that teachers have with administration and vice versa.
So the politics
behind it. Ironically, the politics behind the educational system, and it's tough. It's not all puppies and butterflies and all, rainbows that I envisioned in my head.
Yeah.
So he was like, "It's what I do. That's great. Go get it." But I actually, to this day, actually think he's excited that I chose this different path. Not that his son's, essentially a politician. Mm-hmm. I'm a lobbyist now, so that's some people say that's not a politician, but it's worse. He brags about me and all this other stuff. So, he was supportive. But I think my mom was in the kind of the same camp. She wasn't negative on education, and not saying my dad was negative either. I don't want to have that be the impression. But they were willing to support whatever decision that I made.
Right. What were your, say, early influences or heroes as a kid? Who were?
It's funny, because I was always into history when I was little. My grandmother, I'd say, let's go on a personal level. My grandmother, my father's mom, was my real inspiration to kind of get me motivated to do what I'm doing now, frankly, but I didn't even know it then. But we would read these presidential books and these little, made for kids, obviously.
Right.
And do the trivia and go back and forth. I learned a lot. And so she kind of inspired me to, take up or actually to educate myself to do more. So I think with her on a personal level, she was definitely falls into the hero category. I was a big fan of a variety of the presidents and politicians, just because you look at them, and especially in the early days, the founding fathers. I didn't really know much about Thomas Jefferson or George Washington. Obviously, every president has a history, and they're controversial, which you learn more as we go on.
As you get older, and as America ages,
we
learn more and more of those things.
Some of my heroes were definitely not without flaws, but at one time I mentioned, I said Thomas Jefferson was a hero. And I would say this when I was younger, because, he basically committed treason by writing the Declaration of Independence, right? So
right.
I think it took a lot of balls to be able to do something like that, and it's something I never thought I'd be able to do. And obviously it worked out. So on a political front, he was some person that I admired at a young age. Obviously, again, he's not without his flaws. But as time went on, especially when I got into sports, and this is going to sound very cliche, but obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger became a huge, influence in my life. When I started playing football, I started lifting weights, and of course, everybody went to the encyclopedia, Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, right? Yeah. So, and he was in movies and just, an awesome figure. So he was another person that I kind of looked up to on the bodybuilding side.
And then ultimately you got to be around him some while he was governor.
I did. I actually met him out of all. That's what I always, that's when I look back at how I met Arnold. it's really amazing because you watch him in movies, being a bodybuilt for a few years as well. And just following the sport, he was an icon. And I thought, wow, one day I'm going to run into him. Our senior trip, we went to Austria, and we actually set on a path to try to find Arnold Schwarzenegger, like he lived in Austria when he was actually somewhere in Brentwood in Southern California at the time, which is much closer. I weren't thinking just a bunch of high school seniors trying to find him. So we actually did go to an apartment that had Schwarzenegger. Our tour guide, she was just humoring us. She gave us an address, which kind of messed up because we had some random house like Schwarzenegger. I'm sure there's a few more Schwarzeneggers in Austria than just Arnold's family. So we went to that door, knocked on it, and one of my friends spoke some German. He took a German class or two in high school, and we're trying to communicate, and they looked at us like, what are you guys doing, talking about? So yeah, I was going ends of the earth, obviously, to try to meet Arnold.
Right.
So lo and behold, he becomes governor of California and moves to Sacramento. So to think that I would actually meet Arnold Schwarzenegger at some neighborhood gym in Sacramento, California, where he would approach me, that's amazing.
He approached you.
He did approach me. Now, granted, it was definitely set up.
Okay, I promise we're going to let Spence get back to this story, but right now we're going to stick with the subject that we have at hand, and that's how Spence got involved in politics. When you became involved in the political campaign, basically you're getting units towards your poli-sci degree, or you were just getting experience, or...
I kind of oversold the fact that I chose to do a political science minor. I kind of pulled off on my kinesiology minor early on, and then I just kind of like took other social science courses. Just happened to be political science. And then toward the end, I had about a year left of college. I realized I was like a unit short of a political science minor. And I'm all,
okay,
that would be something. Might as well get it. So I think I was like actually 4 units. So I was going to take a class that was like a 3-unit class, and instead of taking another class on units that I don't need, I mean, why do more? We don't have to, right?
Right.
I realized I can be an intern somewhere, and I could pick whatever time I want, and your units is based on the time you spent. So then I found a political science advisor who focused on internships, and I told him, this is 1996, Bill Clinton running for election, re-election. I told him I want to intern on a campaign, didn't care what, and I remember he picked up a piece of paper crumpled up on the floor on the table. I just remember he got me. He's like, I got an email by a woman named Carrie McKinley. I still remember. She actually still works around here, and gave me the phone number, and didn't have cell phones at the time. So I went back home, called her up, and said, hey, I'd be interested in interning, and I was only needed 1 unit. So I said, but I was willing to take as much time as they needed. So I hooked myself up with that campaign. It was a state assembly race, a little smaller. In your mind, when you think of elections, you always think of like, what you see on movies, Congress, president, that's what I'm going to get involved in.
Yeah.
Even in California, the state assembly and state senate races are still pretty low key. They're just local district races, basically.
About how many in their district? How many?
Oh, how many constituents in the district? In the at that time, it grows with population. There was about 400,000 people in an assembly district, and the Senate, which represented basically 2 assembly districts, is about 800,000, so about doubles. And now it's like Senate's over 1 million, and then assembly is half of that. There's 80 assembly members, 40 senators in California.
So at what point did it start to creep into your mind that you might want to make a change?
Not at this point. This was a fun thing that I was doing. Being a history major, most of what we studied is politics. You study the presidents, you study the wars, and politics always politics crosses over into history. I've always had a kind of interest in it, but again, I was going to be a teacher. So I had fun on this campaign. She wasn't expected to win. It was the time when, I know people that listen to this, they're all over the nation. So this is kind of focused on California, so bear with me. At that time in 1994, the Republicans actually controlled the state assembly, and people know California know Republicans don't control anything in California.
They don't anymore. No.
At that time, they did. From 94 to 96, because in 96, the Democrats were going to try to get it back. Right. It was a midterm election, 94. Typically, Clinton was the president. Voter turnout was down. Voter turnout's down. Republicans tend to do very well. 96 is going to be different. Democrats are focused on it. So they were pretty involved. So they had their candidate in that race who was going to win that general election. He was a former congressman, former assembly member. He was out of politics, coming back, no name. He faced this a woman that I was working for. Her name was Virginia Strawn Martin, and one important part of her that I left out was why that she really appealed to me was she was an elementary school teacher.
Right.
And so I wanted to help this school teacher get elected, even though I knew it was a long shot. Well, she won the primary. And it totally like blew everybody's mind. So then the Democratic machine that's here goes, geez, we got to put some money into this race and start, ramping it up there for the general, because they thought this guy who was going to win the primary didn't win, and so now this unknown person won, and so they're going to just get they're going to get involved in this race, and that's when I really started to see how it went, and I really started to get like amped up and involved. So it became pretty apparent toward as we're moving through that this may be something I didn't necessarily want to stop doing right after the election if she did win, even though it still wasn't a guarantee, but it wasn't something I planned on doing for 25 years.
So you worked on her campaign, say the spring semester of your senior year.
That's correct.
Of college.
That's correct. And I graduated she was in June, so I think the internship actually stopped, but I stayed on through the election. Was it June or May? See, I'm sorry, my mom. I should have looked this up before I got.
It's probably May or June. It's just not that critical.
Okay,
it's not that critical. It's just I'm just trying to get the sequence of like when college finished and
college finished that spring. Summer, because she won. I stayed on as an intern, and they paid intern. It was like $300 for 2 weeks, and I was stoked because I was on like a $500 stipend with my parents, and I lived off of that and money left over. I don't know how the hell I did that. And so this was $100 more, so I was excited. Literally, I know I was kind of been taken like I was being taken a little advantage of. But,
yeah, well,
hey, I was getting paid, and a lot of interns don't get paid at all, so I was happy. And so yeah, I worked to the summer, and I stayed on through November, and when she was announced the winner. So
when she won, had you been thinking about the next step in your teaching career?
What I was going to do is I thought about people that know Sacramento know it's close to Tahoe, and I have a strong admiration for Tahoe. I was going to go to Tahoe for like 6 months, work at a restaurant or something fun, and then go back to school and get my credential.
So basically take a gap 6 months.
That's right. Because, it's like to get my credential, and then as I get my afternoon credential, my plan was get my credential, start teaching, and then work on my master's while I was teaching. That was my plan. But what happened is election night, when it looked like she was going to win, everybody's having a good time, where, some people out there smoking cigars and, having some cocktails. And I remember Virginia looked at me and said, "Ryan, I want you to come work for me." And I was all, cool. And, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a real job,
right?
With like benefits and what I thought would be a lot of money. It's not, not for public service, but, still,
spoiler alert.
A guy, 22 right out of college, that's, whatever, a job right basically out of college is pretty cool. So she hired me, and when she hired me on staff, I was going to work in her district office for about a year, and I thought I would do this for a while, get to know stay in the community, my college town, and then do my plan. Instead of going to Tahoe, I'll work for her for a year, maybe 2, but then get back to becoming a teacher again.
It's always it's little bites at the apple that
That's right.
actually get you someplace. It's hard for like a big thing to be the thing that your life turns on.
That's right.
As I said, I'm fascinated by the decision-making process, but I'm also fascinated by the little factors, the little variables that impact those decisions that we make. Let's unpack what Spence said about the election he worked on. There was no incumbent in Assembly District 1 in 1996 because the previous member, who was a Democrat, was an early victim of term limits. The candidate everyone expected to win the primary had significant name recognition because he used to represent the district before he retired. Spence's candidate didn't have any name recognition, as he pointed out, and she still managed to win. This helped put the seat in play for both parties for a few different reasons. One, because she was an unknown, the Republican Party felt like they had a better chance of beating her than they would have had with her opponent from the primary. Two, her Republican opponent in the general election in November was personally wealthy, well-funded, and willing to spend a lot of money. 3, Democrats were trying to retake the assembly, so they were highly motivated to hold on to the seat and not lose it because the incumbent had termed out. All these factors upped the spending on this campaign considerably. Both candidates together raised about $1.7 million for that general election campaign in 1996. In 2016 dollars, that's about $2.6 million. The district boundaries and numbers have changed a lot since 1996. But in 2016, assembly candidates in the district that now contains Spence's small college town raised less than $600,000. Why? Because it's now majority Democratic, while the new District 1 is now solidly Republican. And not an apples-to-apples comparison, but my point is really more about spending in contested elections and how it impacted the outcome of Spence's decision. All that additional money and attention from the parties probably made it possible for him to have a paid, though lightly paid, position through November of 1996. If his candidate loses either the primary or the general election, does Spence end up in politics? Maybe not.
You get bit by the bug. They call it the political bug.
Yeah.
And once you get bit by it, there's no cure.
Or maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Spence's initial job was in the district office of the member he was working for. This office was in Santa Rosa, California, which is about 2 hours or 100 miles from Sacramento. Not that much stuff happens in the district offices, so I was really curious about what made him think that he would be happy in a long-term career in politics.
So where was the point where you said, I'm so far down this road that being a teacher is not in my sights anymore at all?
When I had a conversation with Virginia and I said, I want to work on policy. I just want to give something else a shot. Mm-hmm. You don't do much policy work in the district office. It's primarily constituent services. It's outreach. It's public affairs, basically.
Yeah.
You're the face of the politician when they're not there. So when she brought me to Sacramento, she liked me a lot and saw something in me, and I really appreciate her for doing that. She brought me to Sacramento, and I started to just work on bills, get involved in policy, and it was just, it's cool. I mean, I was a history major, and now I'm working in a very historic building, historic California standards. And, you just see all the stuff you're doing. Essentially, you're making history every year, and I thought, this is cool. Mm-hmm. And so, honestly, Jim, as the years went on, I started to actually think of maybe I don't want to be a teacher anymore. Maybe this is what I want to do for a while. And then if I don't want to continue this, then I could find another career path. And maybe I will go become a teacher. But I was starting to, in my mind, I started thinking about maybe even going to law school. I started thinking about other things that would build on this experience that I just have, that I'm currently in.
And maybe did it ever cross your mind that maybe I want to get a PhD and actually teach government in a university?
Well, during the during my tenure, my early tenure in the legislature, I have my master's, and I got that in government, and with the thought of I could teach at like a junior college. You have a master's degree, you could teach at a junior college, just kind of like satiate that teaching.
Right.
Not even close to being the high school experience I envisioned. Where I'm saved by the Bell kids all around me helping. I'm the cool teacher. But yet it was still able to interact and still have that teaching experience, have, talking to people who want to learn and I'm being well received. So I still got that. I still had that in my mind. And honestly, even with that master's, I loved going to school. Even in college, I enjoyed going to school. So like you mentioned PhD, yeah, I would look at programs. I still thought about getting my law degree. To be honest, I'm 44. I still haven't quite ruled out going back to school and getting a higher degree to this day.
Yeah, I've ruled it out, but if I had to do all over again, I would have gotten a law degree instead of my MBA.
Yeah,
it would have been the smarter move.
I know getting a law degree now. Just the thought.
It'd be hard.
It'd be hard. I have 2 young kids and the cash got to put behind it and the time, and just when I get home from work, I want to veg out. I want to break open the books and start studying.
Right.
I think we can all say that mental image that Spence had of himself as that really cool high school teacher must have lingered for kind of a long time, and I wondered when it finally started to fade away.
Well, I grew up. I think I realized it wasn't being a high school student's a heck of a lot different than being a teacher. Yeah. And so that it was just over time you just start to realize that wasn't the vision you had in high school is not going to be the vision. You can never go home again, right?
Right.
So I think I just realized that this vision that I had of how great high school was, it may not be it may not be the same case when I actually go into the teaching profession. You know, I just came to the realization that wasn't, it wasn't a guarantee.
Yeah. And as you're pointing out that your dad was saying, it's not really even a guaranteed job in California a lot of the time.
Not anymore.
Because of the budget cycles and the boom and the bust
right.
in California. They're teachers, like newer teachers, always get the ones that get cut first.
Sure. You get the pink slips first. And during time in the late 2000s, when we went through recession, that was common,
Yeah.
Now, it was long after I was already in this profession, but I would hate to have been a teacher if I was aspiring to be a teacher back then, I would have switched course just for survival. It didn't seem like it was. So God bless the teachers. Honestly, it's like just the peaks and valleys and ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
So Spence is not my only friend in politics, and actually I have a friend in labor as well. And I know that they do a thing called precinct walking, and I never really understood what happened with it before. So before we get into what's happening with Spence now, what came after this point when he came to Sacramento, I wanted to ask him about how precinct walking works, and it was so fascinating to me that I'm just including it in the episode. So here's everything you need to know about precinct walking. You spend some time like precincting and stuff like that during election years.
That's right.
Leading up to elections. So you might be local or you might not be local for that.
They'd send me off. It's always in some very not easy to get to place, you know, because the Central Valley that's where the battleground districts are, right. More moderate. So the district can flip Republican or Democrat. So they would send a lot of their troops to those areas. So yeah, I would go, and you have to pay your dues, especially when you're a young staffer. You would go for like a month and just have to like work on a campaign. I was fortunate enough not to be sent away for months to work on a campaign. But I worked on a campaign in Merced, and I went for 2 weeks, and I actually stayed in Sacramento. I would drive to Merced every day and working on that campaign. And
something to be said for sleeping in your own bed.
That's right. Right. So for the most part, I think the busiest time was the 4 days before the election. That's when we were really busy.
So when you're out in the field like that, like how do you persuade someone? What do you say if you encounter resistance, and how much resistance causes you to go, okay, have a good day?
Well, everybody has their own philosophies when they go precinct walking. What I try to do is I try to put myself into the shoes of the person that's answering the door. And what do I want to hear? You can kind of tell body language they want something to do with you. I think the first win is, hey, they answered the door.
Right.
That's win number one. And now you have a very limited window to give them the information that you need to give them. So I hand them the literature, because that's win number two. They took the literature from you. And then if you're able to get something out of your mouth after that, that's the big win. And it was never really a hard sell. The way that that's set up is you would ask them if they're going to be able to support your candidate. And so I would lead in with basically saying who the candidate was, and then I would say, hopefully we can count on your support. And then if they kind of nod me off and just kind of wave me off, I'm like, all right, well, that's either undecided or undecided. Sometimes I say, no, get out of here. That could be a refused. But if they look somewhat interested, then I might further engage them. But it's all about steps. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's usually like, hopefully we can count on your support, and they gave me a nod and shut the door. Sometimes they'll be engaged enough where I'd be able to get them to say that yes, they'll support our candidate. Because ultimately the goal is to find out who our supporters are. So when election day comes around, we try to get them to the polls so that they're able to cast the vote that they said they were going to vote.
Oh, okay. So you're looking for that, not just their opinion, or not just what decision that they've already made, but that motivate them to action.
Ultimately, we want to know, are they supporters of ours? And once we figure out that they are supporters, they're yeses, then we will contact them. We go to on poll day. No, the elections are evolving now because more and more people are absentee voters. They don't vote on election day. They vote days in advance. But for those people that do wait for election day, or even absentee voters, I think they develop a new system. Again, I won't totally go into that. On election day voting, we would go to the polling place. We'll see who's voted already. Because you go to polling place, they have the voter rolls are outside the door, and there's lines through certain names. That means they already voted. And then you see the ones that haven't, and then you go through your list of supporters, and if they're on that list and they haven't voted, we would actually contact them as, hey, don't forget to vote today. So we want to get them to the polls.
So the campaigns are able to see those voter lists.
That's correct.
Okay, because it's public information.
That's correct.
Okay.
They have to pay for it, but they are able to get it.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I did not realize that.
That's right. The voter rolls in terms of like, that's how when you make a call to somebody, you're calling registered voters, and the information is public. But I think there's certain companies that specialize in acquiring that information and then
in cleaning it up,
right? And you pay for that, and that's who we call, and that's what we use to knock on doors. We don't just randomly go to a door and hopefully they're a voter. We know they're a voter. We know they're in our demographic. Some days we'll focus on, just Democrats. Other ones are focused on Democrats and independents, and declined estates.
Declined estates. Yeah.
So we'll knock on their doors, and there's more declined estates. It's growing and growing, right? So we in certain districts we're thinking they probably think like Democrats, and so we're going to knock on their doors and try to get them to vote. But we don't want to necessarily get. Everybody should vote, but in tight races, I'm not going to go knock on Republicans' doors. Hey, get to the polls and vote for our opponent. I'll let the Republicans worry about doing that. That's why those voter rolls are important, so we know who we're talking to. Number one, they're in our demographic. Number two, they're supporters.
So I don't know about you guys, but I don't always answer the door during politics season. It seems like my neighborhood is a magnet for get out the vote precinct walking efforts. But one thing I can say about Spence, I mentioned earlier that he is not a tall man, but he is a good looking guy. He is a handsome gentleman. And at the very least, people shouldn't be scared to open the door to Spence. And I'm sure that opens some doors for him along the way. Now I'm going to have Spence give us a little jump forward in time.
Well, when I joined the legislature in 96, I worked for a variety of members. They had really short term limits, so you spun through them pretty quickly. They're longer now, went from 6 years to 12 years. I lobbied from 2010. I left the legislature in 2010 to lobby for a California Medical Association for 2 years. I left them, that lobbying gig, to go back in the building and work for the speaker, which I always thought would be cool. So I worked for Speaker John A. Perez, but was really based out of the next speaker's office, who at that time was the majority leader, Tony Atkins. And then I worked for another speaker, Speaker Anthony Rendon. And then during that time, I was what they called the floor director. I helped manage.
So just to shorthand it for you, the floor director basically controls the schedule of the bills that are heard on a particular day and maybe has some influence on whether they get heard at all. Kind of an important position if you think about it.
But I was ready to advocate again. I was ready to go find some issues, to go, instead of being on the inside and help navigate the work on the floor and be, consult the members, I wanted to go out, find people who have issues, which there's plenty of people who have issues out there, and advocate for their cause. So there was a good friend of mine who actually hired me at CMA, who was she's partner in her own lobbying firm, Jody Hicks, and they started their own firm, Damari Brown Hicks and Kessler, and business is doing really well for them. And so they needed some help, and they approached me to maybe come and help advocate for them. And it was a tough decision to leave the speaker's office. I mean, it's about as high as you can go, but I thought it was time for me to leave. So long story short, I am now a contract lobbyist for a firm in Sacramento, and we handle a variety of different issues from education, school districts, even charter school legislation. Represent a lot of health clients, which are physicians, ranging from OBGYNs to ophthalmologists. There's podiatrists who may one day be the equivalent to a physician. There are clients, and we have some energy clients. So it's really a cross section of cities. We have a cross section of clients that we're advocating for.
So as a lobbyist, basically you just go up to elected officials and you basically just like hand them money and tell them how to vote.
Totally.
Right?
That's how it's done.
That's the whole thing.
That's it.
There might be some liquor involved.
That's
and
right.
There might be some
hookers.
Some hookers.
Some blow.
Some blow.
Yeah, that's what the press want you to think. No. The way I know lobbyists, just the term lobbying has a negative connotation to it.
It really does. It soes like special interests.
It does. And
it sounds like when people say lobby, that's special interest. Is the
and I guess, but think about the word special interest. I mean, that has a negative connotation, but
everybody has a
special interest, and I think that's. I'll break it down. CTA, school teachers. Obviously, school teachers are impacted by what we do in the state capitol. They need representation to be able to let the legislators know what they're doing either helps them or hurts them. Or maybe they have ideas and they need something changed. Not every school teacher can take the time off and go to the Capitol and lobby their legislator. They need representation. What lobbyists serve they are representatives of those groups, those people. And every interest out there I think deserve some representation in the Capitol. And so that's what they hire people like me to do. When I worked for the California Medical Association, another example, they're physicians. Not every physician, and I love physicians. I have one, but they aren't skilled in lobbying. They aren't skilled in the political process. You can't just set them loose in the Capitol and say, "All right, make it happen." That's why they hire people like me that understand how it works to be able to make those connections with legislators and be able to talk to them and eloquently explain their issue. And so that's really what a lobbyist is there for. They're there to be the voice of their constituency.
If I understand, there are times that you're basically helping draft some bills.
Correct.
Because the members aren't necessarily going to know what's going on in the industry well enough to be able to write those in a way that works.
We're counseling them. I think we have our ideas about how the legislation should read.
And it's not, I mean, some people would criticize that, and you could certainly see how it could be open to criticism, because it seems a little bit like self-regulation. But at the same time, like, they're not the ultimate decision makers about what gets passed and how it gets implemented.
That's correct. The members and the governor are ultimately the ones who, put a law, create the law. We're just there to advise and hopefully are good enough in our arguments that they agree with us and understand that, the arguments we're making are real and they're going to implement that in the legislation. I've had many victories. I've had many losses. You win some, you lose some. Hopefully you have more victories, like I said. But the perception that simply because, granted, I guess to break it down, it costs money, unfortunately, to run for office. And so I think that's where money gets involved. Mm-hmm. Is that, there's a lot of rules that are regulation that ties into how members are able to campaign, do whatever. And so obviously there's money involved in politics, and if they can find some way to roll that back, great. I'm a proponent of it, as long as they can those members are still able to effectively get their message out there to the people, more power to them. So the reason why I'm saying this, it's not like all of a sudden, say, an association donates some money to a candidate, that all of a sudden they own that candidate. They own that member when he goes in. Because that member's like, ultimately they're going to do what's best for their district because they're the ones that are voting for them. So
right.
Just because say CMA, for example, gave this candidate a bunch of money doesn't mean that legislator or the candidate, then now legislator, is just going to do everything lock and step. It does actually, they know you, they want to be open to you and listen to your argument, but ultimately is going to get them to do what you want them to do is the argument you make. It doesn't matter how much money you pump into their coffers. If you just give some BS argument, they'd be fools just to buy it hook, line, and sinker. Or
if you're taking them in a direction that's going to be so far from where their voter support is, basically it's like political suicide. Yeah. Like no one's going to do that because there's not enough money involved. Really, I mean, when it comes right down to it, there's no way to justify getting so far away from the voters that you lose based on political contribution.
In some, yes, there's money involved in politics. We all know that. Yeah. I'm not telling you something that is proprietary information.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think how you sway a member again is, how does this benefit them and their constituents? And that's really what, that's ultimately how you're going to get them to come on board.
So how do you deal with, you're doing contract lobbying now, so how do you deal with maybe an issue that you personally feel differently about than what you're lobbying on behalf of the organization?
The good thing about the firm I work for is there's 4 partners and there's myself, not a partner yet, working on it, and another staff lobbyist. So there's it's a total of 6. So how some firms work, they say it's called like what you eat, what you kill. Like you get your client, and that's your client and yours only.
Okay.
In this firm, it's like the Musketeers. We all we're all in it, right? All for one for all. So if there is, I would think if there's an issue which I'm not comfortable with lobbying, we have 5 of the lobbyists that are able to probably deal with it. But I would say
it's like, who's morally bankrupt?
That's well. I would not have joined a firm that had clients that I didn't agree with.
Right.
This firm that I joined, not only, I'm not just saying it's to kiss ass in case they do watch this, but the personalities I fit with just tremendously well. Like they're fitness freaks. They go to the gym. I mean, they love what they do. Plus, they're work hard, play hard. I mean, they're hustlers, and they also. Their political mindset is very much like mine. They have Planned Parenthood. They have EQCA, which is Equality California, gay rights advocacy. I mean, some of their real social issues I can really rally behind. I don't see us getting behind or them accepting a contract of somebody that's going to defer in their views. They're very strong. They have strong political opinions, and I think they're going to go that route. It's not like, well, whoever pays the most. We kind of make that joke, but I honestly believe that our client base is going to stay strong, and we won't have that problem of working for somebody that we don't necessarily agree with. And because honestly, we can conflict out too. We already have some very good clients, and you're not going to take somebody on that is going to conflict with one of those clients. So we wouldn't be able to take them if we wanted to.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I can't have like I don't know, if you take on independent contractors and then have a union client, because
that's a conflict of interest.
They're constantly battling. So you have a bill. It's like, what side are you going to take?
Yeah, right. And
so while he's not a teacher, Spence sees his role as a lobbyist as informing members about issues that they don't necessarily understand or wouldn't have the experience to be able to make qualified decisions about, which is kind of like being a teacher in a way. Already to this point, I've learned a great deal that I did not know about the political process and about lobbying. And if you're someone who thought, I'd never really thought about politics before, but that's something that I might be interested in, I asked Spence how you should get involved.
Put the time in like I did. Intern my campaign. Nothing helps more than free labor. I think some people want to I want to send my resume to a member and expect to get an interview and get elected. You're a resume of many. The one way you can really get your foot in the door is volunteering your time. And that's what I did. Find a campaign, say there's not a campaign going, become an intern in a member's office. Free labor. And it stinks, but that's one way you can prove yourself. Otherwise, they don't know really what you have to offer until you can show them what you have to offer.
Well, obviously you can't do that full time, because otherwise you don't have any money and you can't live.
Sure.
So some kind of a job you can sustain yourself with, and in your daylight hours.
Yeah, I mean, if you're when I was interning, I would do just a couple hours a day, because in college, obviously you don't go 9 to 5 job. You have classes from 10 to noon.
Right.
Then I'd turn say noon to 2, and then I'd work at a restaurant at night. So I would find my time with a campaign. They understood that, because obviously I'm a full-time college student. I also have a part-time job, and whatever time I can donate, they would allow. I know it was easier for me, and it's easier said than done. But the question was, what's the best advice for somebody? That would be my best advice. If it's not feasible, then obviously, who helps. Making contacts. Like I mentioned, I was in a fraternity in school, and so it's amazing how far that didn't hurt. You find a fraternity brother and talk to them about it, and they may give you at least an interview, and you can take it from there.
And then what would you say to someone who didn't necessarily want to make politics a career, but actually felt politically motivated and wanted to do something on a local level or national level, or what?
Just make Facebook posts.
That's all everybody does. That's easy, and it has so much impact in the world.
That's right. Just make a crazy
Instagram
statement on Facebook. Either side. Just put it out there.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's true. Just throw it out there.
Just how to get politically active. It's a good question. I mean, if there is something you're truly passionate about, I mean, there's going to be. That's a tough question. Say it again.
If you don't want to make politics your career, but you do feel strongly about it, really what it comes down to is people are feel strongly about specific issues. How would they get involved in a way that was manageable with,
let's use
and had impact?
Let's use EQCA as an example, Equality California. They have events, rallies, fundraisers that happen throughout the year. What I would do is, say, for example, if you want to engage and become one of the voices, you would go to a rally, maybe one at the state capitol. Afterwards, they're going to go into the building. They're going to break up into groups and go visit your legislators and let them know what your issue are. Just contact the association of, that's kind of one of the leaders in the area which you have the most interest and are passionate about, and just ask them, I want to get involved, want to engage, get me on your mailing list, your emails, find out when things are happening, and get involved. I think A lot of people, there have been a lot of protests going on. And again, the joke about Facebook posts, it's real because I'll read people, so, some people love protests, some people hate it, but protest is, it's part of the fabric of America.
Right.
So I think they're happening. There's ways you get involved. There's ways to make your voice be heard. And there's always an association that's leading the charge. And I think you get involved with one of them, and then however it works in your schedule, take it from there. And maybe you'll be lucky enough that you'll be able to get to one of those functions where they can take you and actually get you some FaceTime with a Senate member or a senator or a congressman or a U.S. senator.
Well, the phrase I'm seeing a lot lately is protest is the new brunch. Because there's so much protest.
Yeah.
Something that people don't understand about protest that I didn't understand until recently. Usually, they're permitted. They actually have permits.
If you're going to be on Capitol grounds, yeah,
or even other places. Often there are permits.
Sure.
The local law enforcement knows about it.
Yes,
there's somebody who's contacting the news media so that it gets coverage. It's a thing. It's not like it's not a flash mob,
right?
It's an organized thing. It is a form of speech.
I know, and that sounds kind of ironic because it's like an organized protest,
right? But
it also, I think it's a way it's if you want to make sure your voice is heard and is less disruptive. I guess I actually think that is a good approach.
Most protests, the goal is to cause as little disruption to the average person who happens to be in the area going through, who has no idea what's going on, who just stumbles on it, and the most disruption to whoever it is you're trying to
Sure.
talk to.
You don't want the message to get clouded by some other type of controversy, right? Because you're ticking somebody off because you just shut down traffic, right?
Right.
So you don't want to have that be the story. You want the story to be what's your message,
right? And we're seeing people who don't abide by those rules,
right,
recently, which causes a lot of
on both sides. And I would say on my side, I not delusional in thinking that doesn't happen.
It's because it's that next level impulse,
right?
It's like, what can we do? What more can we do?
Right.
Like, we're not being heard. What more can we do?
That's right.
So in that same vein, I don't think you can talk to anyone who is as involved in politics as Spence is without asking the question about how polarized the country's become in terms of rhetoric around different issues, a lot of different issues. I can say that in my own life, a couple of my very close friends are not getting along very well over an issue that they basically agree about, and it all kind of happened on social media. And I think that's really unfortunate. If you think it could happen among friends, then people who don't know each other at all, don't understand the circumstances of each other's lives, are really not likely to see what's going on. Anyway, I had to ask Spence the question. Question is like, are we ever going to find common ground in American politics again? Like, and if so, how are we going to do that? This is the most divided anything's ever been in my lifetime, even including, as far as I'm concerned, like Vietnam War. I mean, that was going on when I was a kid.
Sure. I mean, that's kind of a loaded question. I mean, who knows what the future holds?
Yeah.
I thought, and I was very hopeful when President Obama was elected, this would be kind of the point us in the direction of civility, and we'd maintain that. I think there are some people who definitely disagreed with Obama's politics. Most of
on
Congress.
Both sides.
Yeah,
on both sides.
On both sides. And some of this, some of the issues that, some of the promises he made that some say weren't fulfilled, that was problematic to people on our side of the aisle. But I would say my opinion only, I still think he was a great president. I really do. There's some people who disagreed, and that's fine, because I thought it was, because I agreed with a lot of stuff that he did. I think maybe the people that didn't like him, in my opinion, I'm getting political, overcorrected. Maybe, and that's what got us the president that we have today. My concern is that the other side are going to overcorrect, and it's going back and forth where we overcorrect and just completely polarize the nation, and that's not healthy. So your question was, are we ever going to get back to that? I sure hope so. It's going to find the right type of person, not just person, but the voters as well, because they have to get that person there.
Right.
But Congress, maybe this is good for the current Congress to be able to realize that we need to quit being so polar opposite of each other.
Yeah, they spent so long polarized that finding their way back to the middle, where a lot of people live in the middle. Let's be serious. Yeah. On both sides of
they do. They absolutely do. I mean, I do too. I'm not extreme
exactly.
I'm not extreme lefty. I have, obviously I'm there, but I see both sides. I mean, when I was working for the Speaker's office, I looked. This is why I think I had such a good relationship with Republicans. Was they have a constituency too, and they have their values. I don't discount their values and their belief system. They have values that need to be heard. I don't agree with it, but it doesn't mean that we need to shut them down. Right. And so I think we, just having some civility is going to help.
Any regrets of this choice?
It's funny when you kind of lay out your life, and I'm going to say I don't have any regrets, and I think it comes right down to like my wife and my 2 kids. I remember the whole reason why I went to a small, I think I may have already said this, but I went to a small state university or state college, Sonoma State. And the reason I did that was I just happened to stop at my old elementary school on the way to we call it way to town, so I grew up in the country. On the way to town, I swung by my small elementary school, and I spoke to my principal, Marv Peterson, and he asked me what I was going to be doing for college, and I told him I'm thinking about going to the Bay Area, but I didn't want to go to San Francisco per se. I wanted to be around San Francisco, but I think a small town boy in the middle of the city would be too much. And he's like Sonoma State. I'm all okay, Sonoma State. And so I visited Sonoma State, and although I applied to San Diego State, because in California, CSUs, the state colleges, that's where teachers are made.
Right, exactly. So
it made sense for me to go there. I guess the one regret was, especially now that I'm such a big USC fan, I would like to have gone to a Division I school first, whatever. That would have been nice. So if I would change my career path earlier, I probably wouldn't have gone to a CSU. I would have chose a different college for that experience. But I wouldn't have met my wife, who I met in college. And without meeting my wife, I wouldn't have Brody, my son, and my young son, and my older daughter, Michaela. And so it's tough to say I have regrets when you look at the family that came out of the decisions that I made. If I didn't want to be a teacher and go to Sonoma State, I wouldn't have the family that I have now. Now, you say, yeah, but you wouldn't even know because it wouldn't exist, whatever. But it's what I know now. So people are asking me that now. So that's the answer that I would give. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what would it take? What kind of thing would come at you that would be super less than obvious to you now that would cause you to make another big life decision change?
I see what you're saying, and
not even a career necessarily thing, but
I'll do a career thing. That's the first thing that popped in my head, and you never know until it hits you, right. Just like this, right? It just so happened that I decided I visited that advisor and kind of set me on this path. I worked for a member who was hostile toward his staff. It's one of those kind of like spousal abuse type of relationships where they would like yell at you and then take your drinks afterwards and say, "I'm sorry, I love you. You're good. You're a good guy. You're a good guy." Not,
Personality.
Yeah, right. And I remember just like being really stressed out. And we had one time. I'm gonna give you a long story, and you can feel free to use this or not. He was mad at me because something happened in the budget. It was beyond my control, but he was yelling at me, and I didn't think I was, but I apparently was raising my voice to him, and he hung up the phone, came into my office, and was mad, and basically said, he got 2 feet away from me, or 2 inches away from my face, pointing at my face and says, "Don't you ever raise your voice to me again, ever." And then he sits down and goes, all right, let's figure this out. Okay, let's work this out. Okay, how can we do this? And I'm sitting there like in shock. He leaves, and then I immediately start crying. I called my mom, of course, right? I'm still in my early 20s at this point.
Yeah.
So come on, cut me some slack. I called my mom, and she kind of consoled me a little bit, and I just got to take a walk. So I went on a walk. And I remember walking down K Street, which is right there in the middle of downtown, and I just had a big relief came over me. Now, I'm still in politics, so it wasn't a total thing, but this is the type of stuff that got me thinking, I don't have to stay on this path. Why? There's no servitude here. I can leave at any time. And so that was a moment where I actually thought about leaving. I don't need this. I'll go work at Starbucks. I'm not happy here. So if you're ruining my experience in politics that I enjoyed, looked forward to, and now this is ruining it. I subsequently stayed, but I kind of said, I'm done with this guy. And I went and I found another position within the building that was it was 180. It went from an aggressive member to a real passive member, passive in the sense of his personality, not his work. And he gave me a lot of responsibility. Just a good man who I don't keep in contact as much anymore, but I wish I would. So that kind of saved me. But I was ready to get out of politics right there. He kind of kept me on that path. So hopefully that doesn't. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that was like an aha moment for me. What that next aha moment will be, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm 44. I have 2 kids, wife. I'm trying to figure out what would happen.
But there could be one.
There absolutely could be one. I mean, I think you have to expect that there might be. You can't, you know, it's just to walk around with your head down, just ignoring, you know, signs isn't necessarily good either. So who knows what the future holds?
And there you have it, the less than obvious path of Ryan Spencer, who has no regrets from the decisions he made in the past, but isn't afraid of making less than obvious decisions going into the future. I want to thank Ryan for being my guest twice over the course of a year. You can find him on all social media as @PoliticalMuscle. And speaking of political muscle, here's the full story of how Spence met Arnold Schwarzenegger. And on the other side of this story, I'll have a preview of the next episode of the Less Than Obvious podcast.
To think that I would actually meet Arnold Schwarzenegger at some neighborhood gym in Sacramento, California, where he would approach me, that's amazing.
He approached you.
He did approach me. Now, granted, it was definitely set up. My wife and I, we were at the gym, Cap Athletic Club, and that was a gym that he chose to train at, and it was awesome that I knew that he trained there, but I never saw him there. And so, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hang out here. I'm going to go right after work. I'm just going to work out, hang out until he shows up. Because I kind of heard, I had some friends in the governor's office said he trained like on Tuesdays. So I hung out on Tuesday, right after work, worked out, then I went to the sauna and the spa and kind of just chilled a little bit. Then I realized, I don't know if he's going to be here. Well, I go out, and when I go out to the main lobby, I see one of the CHP officers come in. You can tell they have a little earpiece in, suits, and they're basically the advanced people checking it out to make sure it's all clear. Right. Not a lot of people there.
California Secret Service is the CHP.
The CHP, that's correct.
Yeah.
They're the ones who protect the governor. The assembly members in the Senate have their own in-house security, and they're called Sergeant at Arms. But the governor and the governor and all the constitutional, Secretary of State, the Attorney General, they have CHP officers as their body people. The ones who walk around like this.
Right.
So he came in, and then I knew he was going to come. So I told Sarah, he's coming. Well, she said, well, we'll go home, drop me off, and come back. So I go back home, I drop her off, turn around, come back, and sure enough, lined up in front of the gym was, all the Suburbans, the motorcade parked right there. So I started getting nervous. I almost just kept driving. Dude, I'm not going to go in because I realized I'm actually going to see him, right? So this is a few months after he was elected too. So he was still very fresh and still extremely popular.
Right.
He still was popular. Obviously, he took his hits.
He took some hits,
I parked, went inside. I remember walking in, and I looked to my left, and there he is. Like, you could tell, even if you didn't know who Arnold was, you could tell that he was somebody. The way he just held himself, he could just like glowed. So he stood there. He had his white T-shirt on, long like basketball shorts, just kind of hanging out, just standing there in the middle next to the cable crossover machine. And I walked in, kind of looked to my left, and I'm like, holy smokes. And eventually I was like, okay, that's good. Well, instead I'm like, I'm going to do something. And so I walked to the squat rack and just started loading the weight. And at that time, before I became a good deadlifter, squat was my big lift.
Okay.
So I went all the way up to like 4 plates, which, to me, before I got involved in super training was, hey, man, you're a stud.
Right.
Well, Arnold thought that maybe I was a bit of a stud, because as I'm squatting, I see him kind of walk over and kind of eyeball me a little bit. Have I not told you the story?
Well, you haven't told them the story, so.
Because it's an amazing story. He walks up to like the dump. It's hard to kind of, unless you've been there, it's hard to explain exactly how the setup is, but the squat rack's here, the line of dumbbells are right there. He walks up to the dumbbells, and he looks over to his right, and I'm squatting, I look over, I see him kind of looking at me, and the gym's kind of empty. And then I'm like, oh my God, he's looking at me. So then I'm squatting, and then I see him kind of approaching, and then he is literally like maybe 3 feet away from me, just staring at me. And he kind of knows what he's doing. He's Arnold freaking Schwarzenegger.
Right.
So he knows, obviously I know who he is. So I rack the weight, and he goes, good set. And I'm all, thank you very much. He's all, how long you been doing this? And I said, I told him about, my time training for football and becoming a bodybuilder and whatever.
Right.
Like I just split it all out. And then he's like, you have very good form. And then I'm like, thank you. I expected more of a criticism. He's like, no, your back was perfectly aligned. And the whole time he's talking to me, I was thinking, oh my God, he actually talks that way.
It's not just an act.
I'm doing more of a McBain type imitation from Simpsons.
Right.
But, he was cool. And then he kind of nodded, and I said, thank you very much. It was an honor to meet you. He kind of smiled, shook his head. And of course, all his CHP guys kind of looking, everything okay? And he walked off, and I was just like...
So you realize that your impulses and his impulses about that kind of thing are the same.
Yes.
When you go into a situation like that, you pay attention to who's lifting bigger weights. You pay attention to who's in good shape because it's just how we're just steeped in it.
Well, and that was a bit of an anomaly in that gym too. Not talk too highly of myself, but it's a corporate athletic club.
Yeah.
Not a lot of powerlifters or bodybuilders train there. So, he was probably surprised. He's been there probably about a month trained. Probably surprised to see somebody moving, decent amount of weight.
Right.
A smaller guy at that. And so he probably wanted to pay some respect.
On the next episode of the Less Than Obvious podcast, Matt Reynolds, who had Spence's dream job and took a less than obvious path to becoming the head of Starting Strength online coaching.
Again, people look at me and they think, well, you were a football coach and you coached, and I did coach because when you look like me, they make you coach.
Yeah.
But I really didn't want to coach. I just wanted to teach. And so teaching was the kind of the direction my life was going to go. It was safe. My parents were behind it. My in-laws were behind it. My wife was behind it because she was a teacher, but I knew that a crossroads was coming.
Be sure to check out that next episode. Pretty much everything to do with the Less Than Obvious podcast is done by me, although I definitely want to thank my friends and family who I've made listen to various parts of various episodes to this point in time. You can find me on social media at the Jim McD pretty much everywhere. You can find the show on Instagram and Facebook at Less Than Obvious, and on Twitter at Less Than OBV. The show's available on Apple Podcasts and pretty much all the other platforms. Hit me up with a 5-star rating or review, or however a positive review looks on the particular platform that you're using. And if you have something negative to say, just send me a message directly and don't screw up the rating, because that's painful and it's difficult to get around. I will tell you this, being nice is cheap, doesn't cost you anything, but it can be worth a whole lot to somebody else. I'll talk to you next week.